welcome to this presentation by Allison O'Leary. Allison is an author. She also works with Michael Tugias, who's going to be coming in February in a collaboration with Council on Aging and the Historical Society. But Allison reminded me, she's been here before, probably about 8 years ago or 7 years ago. We had a program with Eastern Mountain Sports. I don't know if anyone remembers that. And they brought in the cleats that people could put on their shoes and all of that. And Allison worked there then. So she's well versed in trekking the New England trails and everything. So Allison has a wonderful book she's written that she's going to talk to you about traveling in New England, in New Hampshire, Vermont, and the Berkshires. And I'll turn it over to Allison. And I'm so happy we have her. And this program is funded by the Friends of the Foxborough Seniors. So thank you to them and to the people who donated to them for us for these programs. So Allison.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
My name is Allison O'Leary. I was raised locally in Hopkinton. No relation to your police chief. But my father's name is exactly the same as his, which is odd. Lots of Irishmen around. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. This is our book, Inns and Adventures. There's some on the back table. And it's about hiking, hospitality, history, and I'd like to add another H, humor. Because it's fun to be out there. It's not work to be hiking. If it's work, you're not doing it right? So what happened is I was a journalist locally. I worked for Boston Globe West. I was a magazine editor. And when the economy went down, my job went with it. So I had all of this free time. I started working for Eastern Mountain Sports over at the stadium and started riding my bike a lot and doing a lot of hiking and exploring. And this is a little bit of my blog. This is what I decided to do, is take my writing background and my love for the outdoors and start to put them together and just, make an account of all the places I had been, all the things I had done. And then I met this guy. This is Mike Togas. And some of you are familiar with him. He's been around for a long time. He had a corporate job. It was similar to my experience. He had a corporate job in Boston and decided that that wasn't enough for him. He needed to write outdoors columns. So he was a syndicated newspaper columnist about fishing and hiking and exploring New England long before I started writing my blog. And he started to write books. He wrote hiking books for the Appalachian Mountain Club. He wrote a kayaking book about traveling all the way down the Connecticut River. He wrote a very funny book called There's a Porcupine in My Outhouse. You really need to hear him talk about that sometime, because that's the true Mike. But he has also written this book called The Finest Hours. Yes. You've probably seen television commercials for the movie. I'm happy to say I saw the movie last night. For the very first time, we're the first people in the country to see it over at the theater at the stadium. It is fantastic. They did a wonderful job with the story. Of course, they did change it a little bit. They added a romantic love story to it, but they have to do what they have to do to get people to buy tickets. Still, it's a true story about two 450-foot oil tankers that split in half off of Cape Cod in the same storm, February 19th, 1952. And it's an amazing rescue story. I strongly suggest you buy the book and read it before you see the movie, but either way is fine. So when Mike and I got together, there was sort of this, who's more of an outdoorsman competition going on. And one day we were traveling, and he said, take a look at my map and tell me if we need to get off at the next exit. And I opened the map and I said, what is this? You've written all over it. There are little things here that say, park at the end of the guardrail and walk past the red house, and there's a good trout hole over here, and caught a couple of big ones over here, and swimming hole. And I said, you can't write on a map. That's sacrilegious. It's like taking the tag off of a mattress, for God's sake. But then I realized, if I don't hold on to him, I'm at least gonna keep his maps, right? So when we travel, this is the way we go. And we decided to take our experiences, my hiking and mountain biking and his kayaking and fishing, and put them all together into this book, Inns and Adventures. So starting in New Hampshire, I started doing a little research for the book, and I went to one of those online search engines and said, I wonder what it would look like if I asked for all of the places just to fish, put a boat in, or kayak in New Hampshire and see what it would look like. And you can only imagine, this is what it gave me. So, what a wonderland we live right next door to. You know, yeah, I think that we often forget how many beautiful places there are in the states very close to us, and places where we can drive in just a couple of hours. And even if you don't do a big hike, you can sit by the river and just let that, relaxation flow over you. You can enjoy watching other people kayak down the river and get their fishing lines tangled like I do. It's such a beautiful place. Part of the reason is that way back 100 years ago, there was an act of Congress called the Weeks Act that preserved the White Mountains National Forest. It preserved 700,000 acres, and the federal government paid approximately $13 per acre to put this land aside. There was a small family that maybe you've heard of called the Vanderbilts, who just happened to own 86,000 acres. I bet they owned it for the wood and not so much for the scenery, but they gave the government a discount. They only took maybe $10 an acre for their 86,000 acres. Just the same, it left all of us with the most beautiful resource, because prior to that, this is what New Hampshire looked like. You can imagine the natural resources and the demand, the pulp and paper mills, the wood for homes and buildings, for ships, for heating, and for many other purposes, left the hillsides looking like this, and of course all of those factories spewing out pollution, which endanger the wildlife and the habitats. But the Weeks Act that created the National Forest was really put in place to preserve the headwaters of the rivers. And that they did, because now when you go up there, this is what we think of when we think of New Hampshire. We don't think of the forests all wiped out. We think it's very pristine, when in fact it's really just come back in 100 years. And starting in southern New Hampshire, in the little village of Hancock, is this absolutely beautiful inn. It's called the Hancock Inn. It has been in operation almost continuously since 1789. And we stayed here one winter, as you can tell. They used to have my little pointer isn't working. They used to have a little tavern right here in the front. And of course, things get renovated and moved around with the different owners. They've moved the tavern to the back. It's a great place to sit by the fireplace and have a hamburger. And they had a gentleman playing the guitar and singing the night we were there. Oh my God, it was heaven. And then upstairs, the rooms look like this. Because along the way, the owners, one owner passed it on to the next owner, and everyone did what they could to preserve such a beautiful piece of New England history. It turns out that when they were renovating at one point, they lifted some of the old wallpaper and found this beautiful original stenciling behind it. Traced it back to 1825, when there were a couple of painters who traveled around. They're itinerant painters, and for room and board, they would paint. And their names were Moses Eaton and Rufus Porter. And now there are rooms named after them in the inn. And even if you could just sneak in and walk through the inn and take a peek in some of these rooms, each room is unique and individually decorated and furnished. It's not like your Ramada Inn. It's not a Motel 6. Each room is just as beautiful. There are pencil post beds with canopies. We had a huge room that used to be part of the ballroom. And the owners told us, that there are sounding glasses embedded in the ceiling so that when it was a ballroom and the music was playing at one end and people were stomping around dancing, the music, the acoustics would be carried throughout the room by this glass in the ceiling. It was really fascinating. I've done a lot of articles on historic renovation, and that was really new to me. I thought that was very interesting. But they've preserved the inn as much as possible, and any good innkeeper in New England can tell you a story about each stick of furniture in the place. But this, this is the parlor in the front of the inn, and the innkeepers are retirees from Sudbury. They had big-time corporate lives, careers, and I don't know why they would choose a second career for retirement, but they seem to enjoy it. It's 24/7 work. So this inn is a great stepping off point for climbing Mount Monadnock, which I'm sure a few of you have done over the years. It hasn't changed much, has it? I mean, the first recorded climbing of Mount Monadnock was in 1725, but I believe that was just recorded because it was by somebody who spoke English and could read and write, correct? Here's the state park entrance. And every time I go to climb Monadnock and I get to the state park entrance down here, they do everything they can to talk you out of climbing it. It's 30 degrees colder at the summit. It's 3 hours up. It's going to be dark in 4 hours. And you better be prepared, and you need this, and you need that. And you sit there and you think, am I really only 50 miles from Boston? Like, this isn't Mount McKinley or anything, is it? But it's not to be underestimated. It's a tough climb. The first 20 minutes in the woods, you think, what's the big deal? And then you hit these rocks, and it's straight up. So for the mile that it takes you to get to the summit, you're going a mile straight up, because it's 3,165 feet. So it's not an easy climb, even though it's known as the second most climbed mountain in the world after Mount Fuji in Japan. And at the summit, it often looks like downtown Boston. But you hunker down behind the rocks to get out of the wind and have your snack and get back on the trail. And then there's the beautiful foliage, of course, this great scenery at the top. This is a mountain ash, which is in bloom in the fall and just has that beautiful red berries. Now moving a little further up in New Hampshire for another hike is the Welch Dickey Loop. And Mount Welch is 2,600 feet. Mount Dickey is 2,700 feet, so they're smaller than Monadnock, and it's more of a gradual climb. Monadnock you can do in a couple of hours. Welch Dickey, the whole loop, is a good 5 hours. It's a longer route, but it's more gradual and more doable. The thing is, this is our big tip, is when you get to the parking lot down here, this is in the Waterville Valley area, when you get to the parking lot, you see all of these people getting out of their cars and heading up Welch. Mike and I looked at each other and said, do we really want to get behind all these people and follow them up the mountain? Oh no. We went to Dickey. And you know what? It turned out to be a really smart thing to do, because when you automatically associate Welch Dickey, that's the way you go. But when we stopped and thought about it a little bit and said, why do we want to follow these people? We did Dickey Welch, and it turned out to be a brilliant, of course, brilliant idea, because the Dickey side has the most beautiful views. And if you're going up in the morning, the sun is warming you. You're not under the trees the whole way. So you get the sunlight and the warmth and all of this beautiful exposed rock surface that reflects the heat. And then in the afternoon, when you're going down the Welch side, you're in the cool trees. There's a beautiful bubbling brook that goes right next to the trail, a hemlock grove. It's gorgeous. But it's perfect for the afternoon when you want to be cooler, saying that you do it in the summertime. This is about as tough as it gets. It's not a terrible hike. And again, the views from up there on the Dickey side are spectacular. all of this, just acres and acres of exposed flat rock. It's a fairly easy hike, very, very popular though. So now, a nice place to stay after you do this hike is called the Lake House at Ferry Point on Lake Winnistrong. And it was recently purchased in the last couple of years by a couple from California. They were wonderful to talk to because they had traveled all over the US looking for an inn to purchase. And we thought, okay, if you're from California, why would you move to New Hampshire? And then they had all these funny stories about, oh yeah, that first winter, you know, a tree fell on our cars, and we were buried in snow, and they had a great sense of humor about the whole thing, so, you know, who's to say? But you could sit on that beautiful porch and listen to the loons out in the lake. They have a lot of water toys, kayaks, and that sort of thing that you can just borrow and use as you like. And inside, in the sitting room, is this beautiful stone fireplace made by stones taken out of the Ruggles Mine in New Hampshire. And I always pause to say the Ruggles Mine is highly recommended for your grandchildren to go to in the summertime. It's a nice contained playground. It costs a fair few bucks these days to get a kid in there, but it's a full day activity. It's an open pit mine that started as a mica mine way back, you know, 250 years ago when mica was used for lampshades and windows and that sort of thing. And now kids can go in this open pit mine and chip away at the walls and take home a pocket or a bag full of mica. And, you know, they feel rich, of course, right? I think when my kids finally went to college, I finally got rid of that bag of mica that had been hanging around for years. It was, no, Mom! They had such fun that day digging in the mine that they didn't ever want to get rid of that memorabilia. It was a little dusty. And now we're on the Pemigewasset River, which is absolutely gorgeous. I don't know if you can see just how clear that water is. You can see straight to the bottom. Now again, thanks to the Weeks Act, we don't always need to curse the federal government. They do some wonderful things, and they've left a beautiful legacy in New Hampshire of perfect clear water and beautiful rivers. What Mike and I do is we take the kayaks and one bicycle, and we drive upstream, say from Campton to Thornton, which is just a few miles. So you park the bike in Campton, chain it to a tree, drive up to Thornton, launch the boats, drift down river, do a little fishing, jump out and swim. Whoever gets to the bike last has to get on it and ride back to the car, bring the car down to the kayaks. But it's so much fun on a summer day, unless there's no water, which can be a problem. This was a little late in the season. But then I went up a side river here, it's called the Mad River, and found this family jumping from the railroad bridge. And I thought that looked like so much fun, I wanted to get up there with them. Of course, there are the blueberries by the roadside that we just gorge ourselves on. Beautiful. Sometimes we forget all of the beautiful things we have so close to home. Now further up on 93 in Franconia Notch, I know this can be a little difficult to read, but there's that ridge of mountains that runs along the east side of Franconia Notch, and it goes, I have to look at my notes, I know the mountains, Mount Flume, Mount Liberty, Haystack, Lincoln, Lafayette, and Garfield, and they're all over 4,000 feet. So you know the Appalachian Mountain Club folks love to check off their bucket list of 4,000 footers. And I've hiked with them a little bit. It's kind of fun. This is quite a spectacular hike. I didn't do the whole thing. I came in here on this dotted line, the Falling Waters Trail, went up and hit Haystack, Lincoln, Lafayette, and then down again. And that was like a 7-hour hike, and it was tough. Here's Falling Waters. It's about a 40-foot waterfall that is absolutely spectacular at the base of Haystack. And then when you get up to the top and you're looking across Franconia Notch at Cannon Mountain, it is beautiful. You feel like you're in the Alps, you know, just a few hours from home. And the hiking trail follows the ridge of the mountains right up over here. It reminds me of the Great Wall of China. It's spectacular, as long as there's no bad weather coming, because then you just get blown right off the mountain. But again, the views, you know, the way this rock is just hanging on like the old man in the mountain. Yeah, right, I know. Nothing is forever. Gravity gets us all, doesn't it? And this is Galehead Hut on the after Lafayette and Lincoln. You come down the bridle trail and you can stop and refill your water, you can buy a snack, and if any of you are or were members of the Appalachian Mountain Club, of course you can stay the night. But things have changed. It costs now about $100 to stay in one of these remote huts on a mattress about, this height, with a lot of other people in a bunkhouse who may or may not be snoring. So there's always places to camp nearby if you brought your own equipment. But it is nice to have these resources and to have a little water to swallow your Advil for the rest of the hike. Because at that point, I really needed it. You know, that was about 5 hours in, and my legs were killing me. But again, for a nice, comfy night's sleep, go up into Franconia, to the Franconia Inn, which is a really beautiful, old-fashioned New England inn. And I'm sure some of you are nodding, you're familiar with it. It started as a summer guest house in the 1800s, when the people from Boston and the cities started to, you know, have enough wealth to get out of the city, enjoy the countryside, and spend probably a couple of weeks at a time relaxing, you know, out in New Hampshire. And it still looks very much the same. It's, you know, the chintz type fabrics on everything, the wingback chairs, the very old New England. I loved it. And it has a beautiful screen porch overlooking a pool. It has a fantastic pub.